So as a society, America has found itself in a good situation of having a demographic shift where women not only entered the workforce after World War II, but stayed in a profound way. The trend of dual earner couples, which is one of the main demographic trends of the 20th century, where we really reversed a situation where about 35% of households had both parents in the workforce in 1960s, to a place where by the late 1980s, by 1990, you had 2/3 of households having both parents in the workforce, and 70% of households, if you count single-parent households, which are headed mostly by women, having the main breadwinners in the workforce. And so most of the children in America went from a situation of having one parent at home to having no parents at home. And with both parents in the workforce, you have two jobs that were paid, but you still had the job of caring for a house and children. And so the needs of families were really outstripping their resources, because there were two people who had to handle 3 or more jobs. And that was led to this acute sense of stress and imbalance. And there's a lot of really interesting subcomponents of that. One is the cost of goods since 1973 has outstripped the median income of most workers. So what I mean by that is the cost, the inflation rate for healthcare and education and housing since the early 1970s have risen at a higher rate than wages, which really, in many cases, forces two parents into the workforce. In many metropolitan areas in the country, you just can't live without two incomes because the cost of those three items, particularly if you have a family, have risen at such a degree. So women enter the workforce in many cases because they wanted to in the 60s, but many stayed in the 70s and 80s because of the economic needs of families. You also have a really interesting dynamic going on in terms of the gender dynamics. The whole work-life field comes out of the women's movement, as I indicated. But now, most of the studies over the last 5 years will indicate that men actually feel more stress in this area than women do. And that might seem a little counterintuitive. Part of the reason for that is that society's done a better job of recognizing and accommodating women in the workforce. The 1993 Family and Medical Leave Act really came out of the stress that women were feeling in the late 1980s. The Child Care and Development Block Grant of 1990 for more child care. Those were seen as women's issues at the time. But now, in my generation, I still have 4 kids under the age of 6. I want to spend a lot of time with my kids, and a lot of my male peers do as well. And yet society hasn't really recognized at the same level the needs and desires of men to do so. So while men still spend less time than women do on childcare, for instance, they've roughly tripled their amount of time on childcare over the last generation, and increasing substantially, almost doubling their amount of time on things at home. And now women have also increased their time in childcare as well, even as they've increased their time at work. And that creates a lot of stress for women because you're increasing your hours in the job, you're increasing your hours with your children. Time with children has not dropped as women have increased their time in the workforce. What has dropped is time for self, time with spouse, time for exercise, time for health. And that underscores the need for something to provide support for women. There's a lot of thought in terms of balance that people use the term and then they see a scale in their mind and they assume that everything sort of on a scale balances, so that on one side of the ledger you have all your things at work, and then on the other side you have the things at home, and that somehow they are in balance so that your life is in harmony if you have an equal amount of time on the job and an equal amount of time caring for children, let's say, or elderly parents. But the reality is that being at home is, for most of us, really hard. Those who work full-time out of the home, meaning as caregivers, find the work of raising children really difficult. And I find myself, and as I talk to many colleagues as well, sometimes the work we do in the paid workforce is actually easier to handle than the child care at home or the work at home. So I think we need to reframe what we mean by balance. I actually think that the work we do at home, the caregiving responsibilities, are on the same side of the ledger as the in the workforce work, the paid employment, because both usually take energy. Now, both can be very, very rewarding. Most of us really love our children and enjoy the caregiving responsibilities, and many people enjoy their work. But they both, particularly after a certain amount of time on them, end up taking our energy. And the real balance is those things that take your energy need to be balanced by those things that give you energy. And that's where spiritual practice and the church has a role to play in providing resources that then help balance the energy-taking activities.